I am Julian, and I am 34 years old. Exactly 3 days ago, I stood in the middle of a $96,000 wedding reception and utterly destroyed my family's reputation. While I was actively funding the entire event, covering every single bill from the imported floral arrangements to the top-shelf champagne, my mother took the microphone and told 200 guests, "He's not married, no kids, but hey, he's always good for a check." They laughed at me. 200 people, including my own brother, laughed at my expense. But there was one thing they didn't know. I was the sole signatory on the trust account holding the funds for the night, and my lawyer had just texted me the confirmation I needed. And right now, they are facing a massive lawsuit, begging me to save them from financial ruin. Before I tell you exactly how I dropped the hammer on them, hit that like button if you believe in justice, and drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from tonight. Now, let's go back to where this nightmare really started. The air inside the Windcliff Estate reception tent was thick with the smell of roasted duck, expensive designer perfume, and absolute betrayal. The lighting team, which I had paid a premium for, had dialed the overhead canopy into a soft, romantic amber glow. It was the kind of perfectly curated atmosphere that makes everyone look like they belong on the cover of a high-end bridal magazine. I was standing near the back corner, near the catering exit, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that nobody had bothered to compliment. I wasn't part of the bridal party. I wasn't asked to be a groomsman. I wasn't even listed on the 4-page, heavy cardstock, gold-embossed wedding program that was currently sitting on every single charger plate in the room. I was just the invisible guy in the background who had quietly wired nearly $100,000 over the last 6 months to make sure my younger brother, Donovan, and his new bride, Serafina, had the wedding of their absolute dreams. My mother, Beatrice, was standing on the main stage. She wore a custom deep navy gown that cost more than most people's first cars. She held a sleek, wireless microphone in one hand and a crystal champagne flute in the other. She had just finished a 10-minute, tear-jerking speech about the importance of legacy, about family sticking together through thick and thin, and about the beautiful, flawless future Donovan and Serafina were going to build. The crowd was eating out of the palm of her hand. Older women at the front tables were dabbing their eyes with monogram napkins. Then she stopped. She scanned the massive room. Her eyes bypassed the VIP tables, bypassed the extravagant centerpieces I had funded, and locked directly onto me, standing in the shadows near the service exit. A wicked, highly polished smile spread across her face. She leaned into the microphone. Of course, looking around this beautiful room, I realize not everyone has a +1 tonight, she announced, her voice echoing perfectly through the state-of-the-art sound system. Some of us in this family are single, childless, and apparently still too busy with their spreadsheets to settle down. A ripple of awkward, polite chuckles moved through the crowd. My stomach plummeted, but I forced my face to remain perfectly neutral. I felt my jaw tighten so hard my teeth ached. "But hey," Beatrice added, her voice dripping with an artificial, syrupy sweetness that I recognized all too well. "He's not married, he has no kids, but let's give him a hand, because he's always good for a check." The room erupted. It wasn't just a polite chuckle anymore. It was a full-bellied, roaring laugh. It rolled over me like a physical wave. I watched my brother Donovan, sitting at the head table, throw his head back and laugh out loud. I watched Serafina, the blushing bride, giggle behind her hand, whispering something to her maid of honor. 200 people, family members, childhood friends, extended relatives, and complete strangers who were drinking the wine I bought, were laughing at me. I wasn't a brother to them. I wasn't a son. I was a walking ATM, a punchline with a bank account. Right at that exact second, my phone buzzed in my suit pocket. I pulled it out. It was a single text message from Clara, my corporate lawyer. The message was incredibly brief, but it held the weight of a nuclear bomb. It read, "Trust freeze executed. All outbound funds halted. You are clear." I didn't scream. I didn't throw my glass against the wall. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, freezing calm wash over my entire body. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked slowly, deliberately, toward the DJ booth. The DJ, a young guy named Tobias who looked completely out of his depth, watched me approach with wide eyes. He looked terrified as I calmly reached over his turntable and took the microphone from his hand. I signaled for him to cut the music. He hit a slider, and the soft instrumental track playing in the background faded out instantly. The sudden absence of music, combined with me standing there holding the mic, caused the laughter to die down rapidly. People turned in their seats. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and incredibly uncomfortable. I looked directly at my mother on the stage. Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by a look of confused annoyance. Then I looked at my brother, whose smirk was slowly melting off his face. Finally, I swept my gaze across the entire room, making eye contact with the aunts, uncles, and family friends who had just been laughing at my expense. "She's right," I said. My voice was rock steady. It projected clearly over the speakers, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I am not married. I don't have children. And yes, Beatrice is absolutely correct. I do write the checks." I paused, letting the words hang in the dead air of the tent. I saw Beatrice grip her champagne flute tighter. Her knuckles were turning white. "But as of today," I continued, my tone completely even, devoid of any anger or sorrow, "the $96,000 that made this entire night possible is legally frozen. The catering, the venue, the open bar you are all enjoying. Those final invoices will bounce tomorrow morning. The money is gone." Someone in the front row dropped a glass. It shattered against the marble dance floor, the sound sharp and violent. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. No one laughed. No one clapped. Beatrice looked like she had just been struck by lightning. I handed the microphone back to Tobias, who looked like he was about to pass out. I turned my back on my family, walked down the center aisle, out of the tent, and into the cool, dark night air. I thought the worst was over. I thought walking away was the hard part. I was so incredibly wrong. To understand how a son could stand up and publicly humiliate his own mother and brother on what was supposed to be the most important day of their lives, you have to understand the deeply rotted foundation of lies and exploitation we were standing on. 6 months prior, my life was quiet, disciplined, and peaceful. I ran a highly successful, mid-sized logistics firm located in the heart of the city. After years of grinding, skipping vacations, and working 80-hour weeks, my salary had hit the mid-six figures after a massive promotion. I had built a very comfortable, albeit somewhat lonely, life for myself. Ever since my grandfather's funeral a few years back, the family dynamic had shifted permanently. I was designated as the reliable one, the workhorse, the one who didn't cause trouble, didn't ask for help, didn't complain, and always picked up the pieces when things fell apart. It was a random Tuesday evening when my phone rang. I was sitting on my couch, reviewing a supply chain contract on my laptop. The caller ID flashed Mom. Beatrice never, ever called just to chat. She didn't call to ask how my day was or if I was eating well. She called when she needed an audience, or more accurately, when she needed a favor. I answered the phone, the gentle hum of my air purifier the only other sound in my apartment. "Julian, darling." Her voice was softer than usual, coated in that maternal warmth she usually reserved for public gatherings or church functions. "We were just talking about you. Donovan and Serafina are so incredibly stressed about the wedding budget. It's keeping them up at night. We think it might really mean a lot to them if you helped out a little. You know, just a few things. Nothing big. Just to take the pressure off your little brother." I should have asked for specifics right then and there. I should have recognized the trap. But when you spend your entire life on the outside of your family's affection, looking in through the window, you become desperate for any crumb of inclusion. I thought helping with the wedding would finally earn me a seat at the table. I thought it would make them look at me as a vital part of the family, not just a distant relative. "Of course," I said, closing my laptop. "Just send me the details. Let me know what you need. You're always so good at handling these things, Julian," she replied smoothly, her voice practically dripping with relief. Honestly, I don't know what we'd do without you. 3 days later, I received an email from Fiona, the high-end, extremely arrogant wedding planner Beatrice had hired. The subject line read, "Initial vendor deposit Jules." I hated the name Jules. It was a childish, belittling nickname my mother used when I was a kid, usually when she wanted to diminish me in front of company. But the name wasn't the worst part of the email. Attached was a staggering invoice for $15,000. It covered custom floral arches imported from Holland and handmade silk table linens. There was no thank you note from my brother. No excited phone call from Serafina. Just a cold, corporate invoice expecting immediate payment. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I paid it, quietly, without complaint, because that's what the reliable, successful older brother does. I genuinely thought it was a one-time thing to get the ball rolling. But the invoices kept coming, the amounts kept growing, and the profound disrespect was only just beginning. I was walking blindly into a financial slaughterhouse, and my own mother was holding the door open for me. The financial extraction didn't start with the wedding. That was just the grand finale. It was a deeply ingrained pattern, a slow, methodical draining of my resources that had been going on for years. Donovan was the undisputed golden child. At 28 years old, he had the rugged good looks of a catalog model, a charming smile that could talk a cop out of a speeding ticket, and the work ethic of a pampered house cat. While I was pulling all-nighters at the logistics firm, fighting tooth and nail for every inch of my career and building my savings, Donovan was perpetually finding himself. 2 years ago, I received a frantic late-night phone call from my father, Reginald. Donovan had wanted to impress a girl he had been dating for exactly 3 weeks. So, naturally, he rented a brand new Porsche 911 for the weekend. He didn't purchase the supplemental insurance because he thought it was a scam. Less than 48 hours later, he managed to back the luxury vehicle directly into a concrete pillar outside a high-end downtown club. The rental company wasn't amused. They were threatening immediate legal action and a devastating hit to his credit. "He's your little brother, Julian," my father had pleaded over the phone. His voice was tight, using an authoritative tone he hadn't earned in decades. "You make good money. You have a massive salary now. Your mother and I can't pull from our 401k for this. The penalties are too high. Don't let a stupid mistake ruin his credit score before he even gets his life started. We are family. You need to step up." He didn't ask. He demanded. I transferred $4,000 that same afternoon to cover the exorbitant damages and the rental company's fees. Donovan never even called to say thank you. He didn't offer to pay me back in installments. He simply texted me a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. A single digital thumbs-up for $4,000. I had replenished his college fund when he blew a massive chunk of it on a backpacking trip to Europe that mostly consisted of staying in expensive hotels in Paris. I had paid for his emergency dental surgery when he neglected his teeth for 5 years. Every single time I stepped up to fix a disaster, I was told how independent I was, how I didn't need much attention. They spun my self-sufficiency and hard work into a weapon, using it to justify their endless demands. They trained themselves to view my bank account as a communal emergency fund. Now, with the wedding planning in full swing, the demands were escalating to a terrifying level. Serafina, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, played the innocent, overwhelmed bride to absolute perfection. She had a soft, breathy voice and a habit of looking completely helpless whenever a vendor contract or a bill was placed on the dining room table. Through Beatrice, Serafina's demands morphed into absolute, non-negotiable necessities. They couldn't just have normal flowers. They needed imported white orchids from Hawaii. They couldn't have a DJ for the cocktail hour. They needed a 12-piece live jazz band. They needed custom-engraved silverware. And Fiona, the wedding planner, treated me less like a family member and more like a rogue, unreliable vendor who was constantly behind on his deliverables. Every email she sent was colder and more demanding than the last. One Tuesday afternoon, I was in my office reviewing a quarterly earnings report for my firm. My assistant had just brought me a coffee when an email notification popped up on my screen. Subject: restroom logistics. Final approval needed. I opened it, frowning. Fiona had written, "Jules, as the designated portable toilet supervisor for the outdoor cocktail hour, I need your immediate sign-off on the placement of the luxury sanitation trailers near the West Lawn. Your mother informed me this falls strictly under your jurisdiction and budget. Please review the attached sanitation flowchart and confirm by end of day. We cannot delay this." I stared at the screen until the letters literally blurred together. Portable toilet supervisor. I was funding half of this extravagant wedding. I was writing checks that rivaled the down payment on a house in a good neighborhood, and my mother had actively assigned me the role of managing the outdoor toilets. I didn't reply to Fiona. Couldn't. My hands were shaking slightly. I took a deep breath, forwarded the email to a private, encrypted folder I had created on my desktop named Wedding Reality, and closed my laptop. The isolation grew heavier with each passing week. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I logged onto social media a few days later, a rare occurrence for me, and immediately saw a post from Serafina. It was a beautiful, professionally shot, candid photo. It featured Serafina, Donovan, Beatrice, and Serafina's mother, Eleanor, all holding crystal champagne glasses, laughing together at a luxury bridal boutique in the city. The lighting was perfect. They looked incredibly happy. The caption beneath the photo read, "The absolute best support system a bride could ever ask for. I couldn't do any of this without my amazing family. Hashtag family first, hashtag say yes to the dress, hashtag blessed. I wasn't invited to the city. I wasn't told about the dress fitting. I wasn't even tagged in the comments as a distant thought or a wish you were here. I was entirely erased from the narrative of the event I was financing." 10 minutes later, my cousin Gareth, who always had a nose for drama and loved stirring the pot, texted me a screenshot of Serafina's post. "Gareth, hey man, everything okay? Notice you aren't in any of the wedding prep stuff online. Sucks to be left out." I stared at the text. I knew Gareth didn't actually care about my feelings. He was a spy for Beatrice, probing the perimeter to see if I was going to throw a tantrum or cut off the funds. He wanted to report back to my mother about my emotional state. I forced my fingers to type a casual response. "All good, man. Just slammed with work at the firm. Glad they're having fun. I learned a very long time ago that showing pain to my family was like bleeding in a shark tank. It only invited more attacks. But the absolute breaking point, the moment the final, fraying thread of my patience snapped permanently, arrived in my inbox 2 weeks before the wedding day. It was the official seating chart, sent out as a PDF to the extended family for a final review before printing. I opened the file and scanned the beautifully designed, floral-bordered graphic. The head table was massive, reserved for the bridal party and the parents. The tables surrounding the dance floor were for immediate family, wealthy relatives, and close friends. I traced my finger down the list on my screen, table by table. Table 10, 12, 15. Finally, I found it. Table 18. Table 18 was located in the absolute back right corner of the tent. I cross-referenced it with the venue map. It was directly adjacent to the kitchen swinging doors and the staff service hallway. It was the table you put people at when you have a strict social obligation to invite them, but you actively, desperately hope they decline the invitation. I zoomed in to look at the names assigned to table 18. There was the photographer's assistant. There was an elderly neighbor of Serafina's family who was legally blind and deaf in one ear. And then there was my name, but it didn't say Julian. It didn't say brother of the groom. It read, Assistant to Mr. Miles. Miles was a local, somewhat sleazy liquor distributor who was a casual golfing buddy of my father. He had donated 3 cases of mid-tier, overly sweet wine for the rehearsal dinner to promote his business. For that generous contribution, Miles was seated at table 4, given a special, bolded mention in the program, and treated like royalty. I, the man who had paid the $30,000 catering deposit, the man who covered the floral arrangements, the massive venue fee, and the luxury restrooms. I was stripped of my name, my identity, and my title as a brother. I was reduced to the assistant of a man who brought cheap wine. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't punch a wall. I sat perfectly, unervingly still in my home office. A cold, absolute calm washed over me, starting from the base of my neck and spreading to my fingertips. It was the kind of terrifying clarity that only comes when every single illusion you've ever held about your family is violently stripped away, leaving nothing but ugly reality. They didn't just take me for granted. They actively, intentionally despised my presence. They wanted my money, they demanded my resources, but they wanted me invisible. They wanted the prestige of my wealth without the burden of having to acknowledge me as a human being. I opened the wedding reality folder, dragged the seating chart PDF into it, and locked the screen. My mind began to race, calculating logistics, reviewing the fine print of the contracts, assessing the exact legal leverage I held over the event. I wasn't fighting for custody of a child, and I wasn't dealing with a messy divorce settlement, but I was fighting for custody of my own dignity. I was preparing for a war they didn't even know they had started, and I fully intended to salt the earth. I was going to win. The next morning, I sent a brief text to Beatrice. Meet me for lunch. White Plains Bistro. 1 p.m. Just us. The White Plains Bistro was an upscale, ridiculously overpriced spot she loved because the waiters wore vests and called her ma'am. She arrived exactly on time, breezing through the door wearing her signature oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses and a beige cashmere sweater that screamed quiet wealth. She glided into the leather booth opposite me, flagging down a waiter and ordering a $40 glass of oaky Chardonnay before he even had a chance to hand us the menus. She expected me to pay for it, naturally. I always did. We made agonizing small talk for exactly 5 minutes. She complained about the unseasonable humidity, about how difficult and uncooperative the florists were being regarding the archway, and about how exhausted poor Donovan was from the grueling stress of tasting cake flavors. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. I took a slow sip of my black coffee, set the heavy ceramic mug down on the saucer, and looked her directly in the eyes. I saw the seating chart, Mom, and I saw the draft of the event program. She didn't even flinch. Her expression remained a mask of pleasant indifference. She took a delicate sip of her wine, leaving a faint, perfectly arched lipstick stain on the rim of the crystal glass. Oh, Julian, please don't start this today, she sighed, waving a hand dismissively. You're overthinking it as usual. You know you don't like being the center of attention anyway. You always hide in the corner at family events. I don't like being the center of attention, I replied, keeping my voice low, dangerously calm. But I do expect to be acknowledged as the groom's brother. Table 18, next to the kitchen doors, listed as Miles' assistant? Are you out of your mind? Beatrice adjusted her cashmere shawl like she was preparing for a minor, slightly annoying battle. Don't make this about your ego, Julian. You know how much Donovan has on his plate right now. And Seraphina's mother, Eleanor, is very particular about the optics of the head tables. She has a lot of influential friends from her country club coming. We had to accommodate them. We simply ran out of premium seating. Optics? I repeated the word slowly, tasting the absolute, staggering absurdity of it. So the optics require you to hide the man who is literally paying for the entire event? She set her glass down hard. The maternal mask slipped entirely, revealing the cold, calculating, deeply selfish woman beneath. She leaned slightly across the table, lowering her voice so the nearby tables couldn't hear her venom. Let's be perfectly honest with each other, Julian, she whispered, her words precise and sharp as broken glass. It's a wedding. It's an event about romance, about charm, and about building a family. Not everything in life has to be fair. You're not married. You have no real prospects, but you are very good for a check. That is your contribution to this family. That is more helpful than any speech you could give or any seat at a VIP table. My heart stopped beating for a full second. It literally felt like a syringe of ice water had been injected directly into my chest. There it was, the ugly, unvarnished, horrifying truth, spoken out loud by the woman who gave birth to me. I wasn't a son. I was a financial utility. I was a tool to be used and discarded. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand an apology. I reached into my suit jacket, pulled a crisp $50 bill from my wallet, placed it deliberately over her half-empty wine glass, and stood up from the booth. "Enjoy your lunch, Beatrice," I said. It was the first time in my 34 years of life I had addressed my mother by her first name. I walked out of the bistro, ignoring the confused look of the maitre d'. When I hit the sidewalk, the crisp afternoon air felt bracing. My chest was tight, but my mind was operating at lightning speed, processing variables and forming a plan. I got in my car and drove straight back to my office. By the time I sat down at my desk and booted up my monitors, my phone was vibrating across the wood surface. It was Fiona, the wedding planner. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, an email arrived with a high-priority red exclamation mark. Subject: Urgent. Canopy lighting upgrade, action required. I opened the message. Fiona had written, "Julian, Serafina and Donovan just had a walkthrough of the venue and decided to expand the fairy light canopy. They want it to cover the entire outdoor cocktail area and the primary bar. The lighting vendor requires an additional $7,000 by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to secure the equipment and crew. Please wire the funds to the event trust immediately so I can process the change order. Thanks." I stared at the screen. $7,000. For some extra string lights so Serafina's photos would have a better background glow. A week ago, I would have sighed, felt a familiar surge of bitter resentment, and authorized the transfer to keep the peace. Today I clicked reply. My fingers flew across the keyboard. "Fiona, I will not be authorizing the $7,000. I am not funding any further upgrades, additions, or changes to this event. My financial contribution has hit its absolute ceiling. Any new charges, including this lighting upgrade, must be billed directly to Donovan or Beatrice. Do not email me regarding any new invoices again." I hit send. Clicking that button felt better than closing a $1 million logistics contract. It was intoxicating. Within 20 minutes, the family group chat on my phone exploded in a flurry of notifications. Donovan: "Bro, what the hell is going on?" Fiona just called Serafina, literally crying, saying you cut off the lighting budget. You promised to help us out. Serafina is having a panic attack. Beatrice: "Julian, stop being so incredibly dramatic. The $7,000. You make that in a week. Do not ruin your brother's big day over a childish temper tantrum because you didn't like where you were sitting. Reginald, call your mother and apologize right now. You are acting incredibly selfish. Family supports family." I read the messages. I didn't type a single word in response. I opened my screenshot tool, captured every single message, and moved them securely into the Wedding Reality folder on my desktop. Then, I opened the group chat settings and tapped Leave Group. The silence on my phone was beautiful. That evening, I had a mandatory corporate dinner with several major clients, including Mr. Harrison, a ruthless real estate mogul, and one of my logistics firm's most lucrative accounts. The event was held at a prestigious, members-only downtown club. I wore a sharp black suit, shook hands firmly, and spent 2 hours engaging in high-level discussions about supply chain optimization, international tariffs, and commercial real estate investments. Near the end of the dinner, Mr. Harrison stood up, tapping his spoon against his crystal water glass to get the table's attention. He raised his glass of scotch and looked directly down the table at me. "I want to propose a toast. To Julian," Mr. Harrison said, his voice booming with genuine, unforced respect. "In an industry full of people who talk a massive game but can't execute, this man actually delivers. He is the absolute backbone of our distribution strategy on the East Coast. He's honest, he's brilliant, and he is absolutely relentless. Cheers to you, Julian." The entire table of high-powered executives, men and women who managed millions of dollars, raised their glasses to me. They looked at me with deep admiration, with professional respect. I took a sip of my whiskey, the sheer contrast of the situation practically giving me whiplash. Here, among titans of industry, I was valued as a leader. I was essential. But to my own mother, to my own brother, I was the portable toilet supervisor, fit only to sit at table 18 with the hired help. When I got home that night to my quiet apartment, I didn't turn on the TV. I went into my bedroom and pulled a small leather suitcase from the closet. I had originally planned to stay at my parents' massive suburban house for the entire wedding weekend, as was expected of the family. Instead, I packed my suit, my laptop, and my essentials. I booted up my iPad and booked a premium suite at an upscale boutique hotel downtown, completely unaffiliated with the wedding venue, the guests, or my family. I was severing the emotional cords one by one. The storm was brewing rapidly on the horizon, and instead of running from it, I was stepping directly into the center of the hurricane. They thought I was just a wallet. They were about to find out what happens when the wallet fights back. The next morning, the sky over the city was a bruised, heavy gray, threatening rain. I bypassed my firm's office entirely and walked straight into the sleek, mahogany-paneled downtown offices of my attorney, Clara. Clara was a shark wrapped in a designer suit. She handled all my complex corporate contracts, my aggressive real estate acquisitions, and anything that required absolute, unforgiving legal precision. We weren't just client and counsel. She respected my analytical mind, and I trusted her killer instincts implicitly. I sat in the plush leather chair across from her massive glass desk and placed a thick manila folder squarely in the center. "I need to talk about the event trust account," I said, leaning back and crossing my legs. My voice was completely flat. When Beatrice had first asked me to fund the wedding 6 months ago, Clara had insisted I route the money through a specific, single-purpose trust account rather than just handing my mother a blank checkbook or a credit card. It was a standard wealth management protection strategy to prevent exactly the kind of unchecked bleeding I was currently experiencing. Because of Clara's foresight, I was the sole grantor and the sole trustee of that account. I held the keys to the kingdom. Clara opened the folder, her sharp eyes scanning the top sheets of the financial documents. The account currently holds the remaining $96,000 earmarked for the final vendor payouts. Those disbursements are scheduled to clear the night of the wedding, upon final delivery of services. "What's the issue, Julian?" "I want to freeze it," I said, staring directly into her eyes. "I want to enact a complete, impenetrable block on all discretionary disbursements. Not a single cent leaves that account without my physical, notarized signature." Clara stopped reading. She slowly lowered the documents and looked up at me. She studied my face for a long, quiet moment. She didn't ask about my feelings. She didn't offer empty sympathy. She asked about the fallout. "Julian, you understand the legal mechanics of what you are asking me to do. If you freeze the trust 48 hours before the event, the vendors will not get paid. The estate venue, the high-end caterers, the lighting company, the band. They will immediately pursue the named parties on the contracts for breach of agreement and failure to pay." "Who signed the actual vendor contracts?" I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear her confirm it legally. "Fiona drafted them on behalf of the planning agency, but Beatrice and Donovan signed as the primary clients and guarantors," Clara confirmed, tapping her silver pen against the glass desk. "You are legally classified as a third-party financier, a voluntary donor. If you pull the funding, liability falls entirely 100% on their shoulders. They will be staring down a massive, coordinated lawsuit from half the luxury event industry in this city." "Do it," I said, my tone absolute. "Draft the freeze. Don't file it yet. Have it ready to execute on my command." "Consider it done," Clara said, a faint, predatory smile touching the corners of her lips. She recognized a counteroffensive when she saw one. Later that afternoon, while I was back at my firm reviewing the trust documents Clara had sent over, the universe decided to hand me an unexpected, devastating gift. It came in the form of a massive, incredibly stupid clerical error by Fiona, the wedding planner. I received an email with the subject line, "Final program proofs, Do not forward. Fiona, in her rushed arrogance, had accidentally autofilled my email address instead of the florist's. I opened the email chain. It was a long, nested thread between Fiona, Beatrice, and Serafina's mother, Eleanor. I read through the messages, my jaw clenching so hard my teeth ground together. Eleanor had written, "Beatrice, are we absolutely sure we have to include Julian in the printed program at all? My friends from the club are going to ask questions about why he isn't married yet at his age. It reflects poorly on the family dynamic. It makes him look defective." Beatrice replied, "I agree completely, Eleanor. Let's keep Julian out of the speeches, the toasts, and the program entirely. He's socially awkward anyway. He'll prefer being behind the scenes. We'll just say he helped Fiona with the background logistics if anyone asks." They were literally, explicitly conspiring in writing to erase my existence from the history of an event I was single-handedly paying for. But the final email in the thread, sent by Fiona just an hour prior, was the one that truly sealed their fate and escalated the situation from family drama to actual, actionable felony. Fiona had written, "Beatrice, the notary is ready for the real estate transfer forms regarding the Yonkers apartment. Let me know when you have Julian's signature so we can present it to Donovan at the rehearsal dinner." I froze. My blood ran completely cold. The Yonkers apartment. 3 years ago, I bought a small, updated 2-bedroom apartment in Yonkers as a starter investment property. Out of a deeply misplaced sense of familial duty, I had let my parents manage the rental income, allowing them to keep the profits for their own retirement fund. But the deed, the mortgage, the absolute legal ownership was entirely in my name. I grabbed my phone and immediately dialed Clara. She answered on the first ring. "Look into the Yonkers property," I barked into the phone, dropping all pleasantries. "Now, Beatrice is trying to do something with the deed. I think she's trying to gift it." "Give me an hour," Clara said, her tone instantly shifting to high alert. It took her less than 45 minutes to uncover the truth. She called me back, her usually calm, unflappable voice laced with genuine shock and disgust. "Julian," Clara said, taking a breath. "Beatrice hired a shady public notary she knows from her country club. She had him draft a quitclaim deed. She was planning to forge your signature to transfer the Yonkers apartment into Donovan and Serafina's names as a surprise, grand gesture wedding gift from the parents." The silence in my office was deafening. The hum of the city traffic outside my window seemed to fade away. My own mother wasn't just using me as an ATM. She wasn't just insulting me. She was actively plotting to commit real estate fraud, risking federal charges, to steal my property and hand it to her golden child to make herself look like a generous matriarch. It was a level of malice, entitlement, and sheer delusion I couldn't even fully comprehend. I wasn't just dealing with ungrateful, toxic family members anymore. I was dealing with criminals. "Block it," I said, my voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a dark, terrifying energy. "File a preventive claim on the deed immediately. Slap a lien on it if you have to, and call that notary. Let him know that if that document is processed, if my forged signature appears on any legal document, I will personally see him disbarred, bankrupt, and imprisoned for fraud." "Already on it, Julian," Clara replied, the sound of her furious typing echoing through the phone. "Julian, I've seen a lot of ugly family disputes over inheritances and trusts. But this is beyond toxic. This is outright theft. You have no moral or legal obligation to these people anymore." "I know," I said, looking out at the city skyline, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. "Have the trust freeze ready. We execute on Saturday night, right in the middle of the reception." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel anger anymore. Anger is hot, messy, and uncontrollable. Anger makes you make mistakes. What I felt was absolute, freezing cold detachment. I was no longer a son seeking approval. I was no longer a brother trying to buy affection. I was an executioner, and the guillotine was polished, sharpened, and ready to drop. The eye of the storm is deceptively calm. A brief moment of quiet before the back half of the hurricane tears the roof off the house. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought I was too weak to fight back. I knew exactly what kind of financial and social destruction was coming their way, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to watch them burn. The evening of the rehearsal dinner was a masterclass in psychological torture and misplaced arrogance. It was held at the Oakwood Valley Country Club, an exclusive, gated enclave on the affluent edge of the city. This was a place where the initiation fees alone could easily cover a 4-year college fund, and the members spent their weekends comparing their real estate portfolios and complaining about their HOA board meetings. Naturally, I was the one footing the entire bill for the private dining room, the top-tier open bar, and the extravagant 4-course meal. But if you walked into that mahogany-paneled room as a stranger, you would assume I was just a mid-level corporate employee who had won a charity raffle to attend. I arrived exactly on time, handing the keys of my sedan to the valet while sports cars and luxury SUVs lined the circular driveway. I was wearing a sharp, custom-tailored navy suit, but I felt entirely invisible the moment I crossed the threshold. The private dining room was already buzzing with loud, performative laughter. Beatrice was holding court near the massive, roaring stone fireplace. She was wearing a stunning, floor-length silver dress that caught the ambient light, holding a glass of expensive Pinot Noir. She was surrounded by Serafina's wealthy relatives, holding them captive with some exaggerated story. As I walked in, nobody turned to greet me. Nobody offered me a drink. My own father, Reginald, glanced in my direction, quickly looked away, and took a sip of his scotch. I stood near the entrance for a solid 3 minutes, completely unacknowledged in a room I had paid $10,000 to secure. I finally made my way to the marble-topped bar and ordered a club soda with a lime wedge. As the bartender handed me the drink, my cousin Gareth materialized next to me. Gareth was the family opportunist, a guy who still aggressively bragged about his high school football days while actively dodging child custody payments for his 2 kids from a previous marriage. "Julian, my man," Gareth said, clapping me hard on the shoulder, his breath already heavy with expensive whiskey. "I honestly didn't think you'd actually show up tonight. You've been MIA all week. Your mom said you were throwing a massive temper tantrum over the lighting budget or something. Said you were stressed about your salary." I looked at Gareth, feeling a wave of utter disgust. "I've been busy," I said, my voice deliberately flat and uninviting. "Work doesn't stop just because someone is renting a tuxedo." Right, the big executive with the massive corporate salary," Gareth chuckled, shaking his head as if my career was a cute hobby. "Well, try to put on a happy face tonight, okay? You don't want to ruin Donovan's vibe. The kid is under a lot of pressure." Pressure. I looked across the room. Donovan was currently standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, laughing hysterically while showing Serafina's bridesmaids a video on his phone. He was wearing a custom-tailored velvet dinner jacket that I knew for a fact cost $3,000, billed directly to the event trust. He didn't look like a man under pressure. He looked like a man who had successfully convinced the world that he was royalty, completely ignoring the exhausted peasant who was manually holding up his throne. I left Gareth at the bar without another word and went to find my seat. I didn't need to look at the beautifully calligraphed place cards to know where I was placed. I walked straight to the far end of the long banquet table, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. I was sandwiched between Serafina's elderly great-aunt, who immediately complained about the air conditioning, and Miles, the local liquor distributor who had donated a few cases of mid-tier wine for the evening. Miles sat down next to me a few minutes later, loosening his silk tie and smelling strongly of cheap, overpowering cologne. He looked at me, completely failing to recognize me as the groom's brother, despite having met me briefly years ago. "Hey buddy," Miles said, extending a clammy hand. "I'm Miles. I'm the primary beverage sponsor for the weekend. I secured the vintage Bordeaux they're pouring down at the head table. You a friend of Donovan's from college or something?" I looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. "I'm Julian. I'm Donovan's older brother." Miles blinked, his confident smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he recovered with aggressive friendliness. "Oh, right. The brother. Beatrice mentioned you. Said you were in logistics or shipping or something. Listen, if you need any help carrying boxes tomorrow or coordinating the vendor drop-offs, just let my guys know. We're a team player operation. We know how hard the behind-the-scenes staff works. He actually thought I was part of the hired help. Because of my placement at the table, because of how Beatrice had framed my existence, he assumed I was the manual labor coordinator. I didn't correct him. I didn't explain that my logistics firm handled international freight, not carrying boxes of cheap wine. I just gave a slow, measured nod and turned my attention to my water glass. The dinner service began, and the charade went into absolute overdrive. Eleanor, Serafina's mother, stood up to give the first toast. She was a woman who wore her husband's inherited real estate money like a suit of armor, looking down her nose at anyone who didn't summer in the Hamptons. She tapped her crystal glass with a silver spoon and smiled radiantly at Donovan and Serafina. To my beautiful daughter and my wonderful new son. Eleanor projected her voice across the room, ensuring the wait staff heard her wealth. When Serafina first brought Donovan home, I knew he was special. He comes from such a generous, loving, established family. Reginald and Beatrice, you have truly outdone yourselves. This entire weekend is a testament to your incredible taste and your deep pockets. The table laughed politely. Beatrice placed a hand over her heart, looking remarkably, disgustingly humble. "Oh, Eleanor, please," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with fake modesty. "Family is absolutely everything. We would move mountains, we would drain every account to make sure our children have the perfect start in life. It's just what devoted parents do. We want to give them the world." She didn't mention my name. She didn't look in my direction. She accepted the applause, the praise, and the immense social currency of being a wealthy matriarch, entirely on my dime. I sat there, cutting into my filet mignon, chewing methodically. The steak tasted like ash, but I swallowed it down. I was funding the very illusion that was actively erasing me. Then Donovan stood up. He raised his glass, his handsome face flushed with wine and unearned victory. "I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone in this room," Donovan said, flashing his $1,000,000 smile. "To my beautiful bride, I love you more than anything. To Eleanor and Arthur, thank you for welcoming me into your family with open arms. And to my parents, Mom, Dad, you guys are my absolute rocks. You made all of this happen. Every detail, every flower, every light. I literally could not have done this without you." He raised his glass directly to Beatrice and Reginald. The room applauded again, louder this time. Donovan sat down, kissing Serafina on the cheek. Not a single syllable about his older brother. Not a single nod of acknowledgement. Total, calculated erasure. After dinner, as the staff aggressively cleared the dessert plates and served coffee, Beatrice walked over to my end of the table. She stood behind my chair, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her manicured nails dug slightly into the fabric of my suit jacket, a silent warning. "Julian," she whispered, her tone completely changing from the sweet matriarch she was playing 5 minutes ago. It was cold, sharp, and demanding. "I need you to personally confirm that the final vendor checks will clear tomorrow at exactly 5 p.m. Fiona says the caterer is threatening to pull the waitstaff if the funds aren't verified by their bank before the reception officially starts." I turned my head slightly, looking up at her perfectly contoured face. "The trust account is fully funded, Beatrice. The money is sitting right there." "Good," she said, her grip tightening for a second before releasing. "Don't mess this up, Julian. We have a very special surprise planned for Donovan tomorrow during the speeches. Eleanor's friends from the country club are expecting a flawless execution. Stay out of Fiona's way, let the professionals work, and just make sure those checks do not bounce." The surprise. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face blank. She was talking about the Yonkers apartment. Even now, she was still planning to hand over the forged quitclaim deed, pretending it was a grand real estate gift from her and Reginald. She had absolutely no idea that Clara had already filed a preventive claim, contacted the corrupt notary, and practically put a legal tripwire around the property. "I won't mess anything up," I said, my voice dead calm. "Tomorrow is going to be a day everyone in this room remembers for the rest of their lives." She smiled, completely missing the dark double meaning of my words. She patted my shoulder condescendingly and walked back to her adoring audience at the head table. I stayed at the table for another 20 minutes, observing the room. I watched my family celebrate their fabricated wealth. I watched them build a towering castle made entirely out of my sacrifices. They were so incredibly smug, so deeply complacent in their exploitation, that they never even bothered to check if the foundation was cracking beneath their feet. I left the country club without saying goodbye to anyone. I drove back to my downtown hotel suite in silence. I opened my laptop, pulled up my messages, and sent a single text to Clara. "Are we locked and loaded for tomorrow?" Her reply came back less than a minute later. "The trust freeze is fully drafted and legally sound. I just need your final authorization text to execute it directly with the bank's wealth management division. Once you give me the green light, it's financial Armageddon. Sleep well, Julian." I closed my laptop, walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window of my suite, and looked out at the glittering city skyline. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy my way into my family's heart. I paid off massive debts, I funded college funds, I covered ridiculous medical bills. I genuinely thought generosity was the currency of love. But I had finally realized the brutal truth. You cannot buy respect from people who fundamentally view you as an object, an appliance meant to dispense cash on demand. Tomorrow, I wasn't just going to cut off the money. I was going to cut out the cancer. I went to bed, and for the first time in 6 excruciating months, I slept a full, unbroken 8 hours. The eye of the storm had passed. The hurricane was about to make landfall. The wedding day arrived with perfect, unseasonably warm weather. Not a cloud in the sky. The Wincliffe estate looked exactly like a $1 million Pinterest board brought to life. The expansive green lawns were manicured to absolute perfection. The massive white reception tent was draped in imported, sheer silk and thousands of white orchids that cost more than a luxury sedan. A live string quartet played softly in the background as guests began to arrive in chauffeured town cars and luxury vehicles. It was a masterpiece of high-end event planning, and it was entirely funded by my blood, sweat, and corporate salary. I arrived an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. I didn't go to the bridal suite to see Serafina and the bridesmaids. I didn't go to the groom's quarters to wish Donovan luck or share a brotherly drink. I walked the perimeter of the estate alone, observing the vendors frantically setting up. I saw Fiona, the wedding planner, barking aggressive orders at a team of exhausted florists. When she spotted me walking near the cocktail patio, she immediately rolled her eyes and marched over, a clipboard pressed to her chest. "Julian," she snapped, not even bothering to offer a basic greeting. "The luxury restroom trailers arrived late. I need you to go down to the West Lawn immediately and personally ensure the sanitation crew connects the water lines properly. I do not have time to hold their hands, and Beatrice said you were handling this." I looked at her. I really looked at her. She was a woman who made her living off the vanity and insecurity of others, treating anyone not directly signing her paycheck like absolute dirt. She didn't realize I was the one whose name was on the bank account funding her exorbitant fee. "Fiona," I said, my voice incredibly calm, almost a whisper, "I am a guest at this wedding. I am not your sanitation supervisor. I am not on your payroll. Figure it out yourself, or tell the guests to use the woods." Her mouth dropped open in profound shock. Her face turned a blotchy shade of red. Before she could formulate a response or scream for security, I turned my back on her and walked away, heading toward the ceremony seating. The satisfaction of that small boundary was intoxicating, but I knew it was just a tiny appetizer for the main course that was coming. The ceremony itself was a blur of performative, manufactured emotion. Serafina looked beautiful in a custom designer gown. Donovan looked handsome. They exchanged vows that sounded like they were copied and pasted directly from a cheesy romantic comedy script. My parents sat in the front row, holding hands, dabbing fake tears from their eyes for the benefit of the videographer. I sat in the fourth row on the far aisle, my face a carefully constructed mask of polite, unbreakable indifference. When the ceremony ended, the guests transitioned to the massive reception tent for the cocktail hour and dinner service. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the $70,000 fairy light canopy, the one I had supposedly refused to upgrade, illuminated the tent in a breathtaking, magical amber glow. It was stunning. It was perfect. And it was all a lie. I bypassed the crowded bars and found my place at table 18, exactly where the seating chart said I would be, right next to the kitchen doors. Every single time a waiter walked out with a heavy tray of food, the wooden doors swung violently open, the hinges squeaking, occasionally hitting the back of my chair. The photographer's assistant, a nervous kid who looked like he was barely 19, sat across from me, intensely editing photos on his laptop and ignoring the meal. Miles, the wine guy, was nowhere to be seen. He had apparently complained and successfully upgraded himself to a better table closer to the dance floor. Dinner was served. The expensive wine flowed freely. The noise level in the tent rose to a deafening roar of celebration and clinking glasses. And then the highly anticipated speeches began. Eleanor spoke first, offering another glowing, slightly condescending tribute to Donovan's incredible pedigree and the merging of two powerful families. The maid of honor gave a tearful speech about Serafina's pure heart. Then Beatrice took the stage. She stood in her custom navy gown, the spotlight hitting her perfectly, illuminating the diamonds at her throat. She held the wireless microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. The entire room went dead silent, giving her their undivided, reverent attention. To love, to legacy, and to family, Beatrice began, her voice echoing flawlessly through the massive speakers. When Donovan was a little boy, he always lit up every single room he walked into. He has always been our shining star, our greatest joy. And today, seeing him marry the absolute girl of his dreams, Reginald and I couldn't be prouder. We wanted to give them the world tonight, and looking around this beautiful room, seeing all of you, I think we managed to do just that. The crowd applauded warmly. She paused, letting the applause wash over her, soaking up the admiration. Then, she scanned the room. She was looking for me. She found me sitting in the shadows at table 18, completely isolated from the joy of the family. A cruel, highly polished smile spread across her face. She couldn't resist the urge. She had the audience. She had the power, and she wanted to twist the knife one last time to make herself look superior and funny to her country club friends. Of course, looking around, I see not everyone has a +1 tonight, she announced, her tone shifting to a mocking, pitying cadence. Some of us in this family are single, childless, and apparently still too busy with their boring corporate spreadsheets to settle down. The awkward chuckles started immediately. People turned in their seats, craning their necks to figure out who she was talking about. But hey, Beatrice added, her voice dripping with venom masked as playful humor. He's not married, he has no kids, but let's give him a hand, because he's always good for a check. The room erupted into roaring, genuine laughter. Donovan threw his head back and laughed. Serafina giggled, covering her mouth. The guests, fueled by the open bar and the festive atmosphere, laughed at the pathetic older brother who had to buy his way into the room. I didn't blink. I reached into my suit pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my messages. I typed one single word to Clara. Execute. I hit send. 5 seconds later, the reply came back, vibrating in my palm. Trust freeze executed. All outbound funds halted. You are clear. Burn it down. I didn't rush. I pushed my chair back, the wooden legs scraping loudly against the marble floor. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket with deliberate slowness. I walked down the center aisle of the tent, past the laughing guests, past the massive floral centerpieces, straight toward the DJ booth. Tobias, the young DJ, saw the look on my face and physically recoiled. I didn't ask for the microphone. I simply reached out and took it from his trembling hand. I reached over his equipment and hit the master slider on his soundboard, killing the background music instantly. The sudden, aggressive silence acted like a vacuum, sucking the laughter entirely out of the room. 200 pairs of eyes snapped toward me. I turned to face the room. I looked directly at my mother, who was still standing on the stage, her smile suddenly frozen, her eyes widening in confusion. "She's right," I said. My voice was calm, incredibly deep, and resonated through the speakers with absolute, terrifying authority. "I am not married. I don't have children. And yes, Beatrice, you are absolutely correct. I do write the checks." I paused. The silence in the tent was so profound I could hear the wind rustling the heavy canvas roof. "I wrote the $30,000 check for the catering you are currently eating," I continued, stepping away from the DJ booth and pacing slowly in front of the head table. "I wrote the $25,000 check for this venue. I paid for the imported flowers. I paid for the luxury restrooms. I paid for the dress. In total, I have contributed exactly $96,000 to ensure my little brother had the wedding of his dreams." I stopped pacing and locked eyes with Donovan. The color was rapidly draining from his face, leaving him looking sickly pale. He looked like he was going to throw up. "But there is a massive difference between generosity and extortion," I said, my voice hardening into cold steel. "And as of exactly 30 seconds ago, the trust account holding the final vendor payouts for this entire event has been legally, permanently frozen." A collective gasp echoed through the massive room. Someone in the front row dropped a crystal wine glass. It shattered against the floor, a sharp, violent sound that cut through the unbearable tension. "The funds are gone," I stated clearly, making sure every single person heard me. "Every single vendor invoice due tonight will bounce tomorrow morning. The liability for those contracts rests entirely on the legal signatories. Beatrice, Donovan, good luck explaining to the catering company and the estate management why their checks are useless." Beatrice dropped her microphone. It hit the wooden stage with a loud, piercing feedback screech that made half the room cover their ears in pain. "Julian, have you lost your damn mind?" Beatrice shrieked, all of her elegant, practiced composure entirely evaporating. She looked unhinged. "You can't do this. You are ruining everything." "I just did," I replied coldly. "Oh, and Beatrice? Before you try to present Donovan with that surprise real estate gift you promised him, you should know my lawyer filed a preventive claim on the Yonkers apartment deed this morning. If your shady country club notary files that forged quitclaim deed, he goes to federal prison, and you go with him." The collective shock in the room escalated to absolute, unmitigated chaos. Eleanor, Seraphina's mother, stood up so fast she knocked her chair backward. "Forged deed? What is he talking about? Beatrice, you told us you owned that building. You told us Donovan was wealthy." I didn't stay to watch the rest of the meltdown. I had delivered the payload. I handed the microphone back to the terrified DJ. I turned my back on the screaming, panicked family, walked down the aisle, out of the tent, and into the dark, quiet parking lot. I reached my car and unlocked the door. Just as I grabbed the handle, I heard footsteps crunching heavily on the gravel behind me. "Julian, wait, Julian, stop." I turned around. Donovan was sprinting toward me, his expensive velvet tuxedo jacket flapping open, his face covered in sweat. He looked frantic, desperate, and entirely stripped of his golden child arrogance. "Julian, you can't leave," Donovan panted, grabbing my arm with both hands. "Fiona is literally hyperventilating in the kitchen. The venue manager just came over and said if the final wire transfer doesn't clear by midnight, they are calling the police for theft of services. They are going to lock us out. You have to unfreeze the account." I looked at his hands gripping my suit jacket. I didn't shake him off. I just stared at his hands until he realized what he was doing and slowly let go, stepping back. "I don't have to do anything, Donovan," I said, my voice completely empty of any sympathy or brotherly affection. "You signed the contracts. You wanted to play the big shot for your bride's family. You wanted the 12-piece band and the imported orchids. Now you get to pay for them. I don't have that kind of money, he screamed, his voice cracking like a teenager's. I work part-time. Mom and Dad don't have it either. Their 401k is tied up. You're ruining my life. You're ruining my marriage before it even starts. No, Donovan, I said quietly, opening my car door and getting in. I'm just refusing to subsidize your lies anymore. Have a great honeymoon. I shut the door, started the engine, and drove away, leaving him standing alone in the gravel parking lot, watching the red taillights of his personal ATM disappear into the night. I woke up the next morning in my luxurious hotel suite. The sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, warm shadows across the carpet. The city outside looked peaceful, completely unaware of the absolute devastation I had caused the night before. I didn't have a hangover. I didn't have a headache. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I didn't feel a crushing, suffocating sense of anxiety about my family's approval or what disaster I needed to fix next. I felt incredibly, dangerously light. I rolled over and picked up my phone from the nightstand. The screen was a literal digital war zone. I had 72 missed calls. 30 of them were from Beatrice, 15 from Donovan, 10 from my father, Reginald, 5 from Eleanor. The rest were from numbers I didn't recognize, likely frantic vendors trying to secure their payments. I had over 100 text messages. The family group chat, which they had apparently desperately re-added me to, was a rolling feed of absolute hysteria and vitriol. Beatrice, Julian, pick up the phone right now. This is not funny. The caterer is threatening to sue us. They literally locked the gates of the estate last night until we gave them a credit card, and Dad's card maxed out instantly. Call me, Donovan. Bro, Serafina is packing her bags at the hotel. She won't even look at me. She says she won't go on the honeymoon until you fix this. Please, I'm begging you. Just unlock the trust. I'll do whatever you want. Reginald, you have destroyed this family. You are a complete disgrace. You will pay for this humiliation. I didn't reply to a single one of them. I didn't feel the urge to argue or defend myself. I took screenshots of the entire thread for my legal files, ensuring I had a record of their threats and admissions of debt. Then, I permanently blocked every single number associated with my immediate family. I got out of bed, ordered a ridiculously expensive room service breakfast consisting of eggs Benedict, fresh fruit and black coffee, and called Clara. Tell me you slept well, Clara said as soon as she answered. I could hear the distinct sound of aggressive typing in the background. She was already at her desk, entirely in her element. Like a baby, I replied, taking a sip of coffee. What's the fallout looking like this morning? It is an absolute, unmitigated bloodbath, Clara said, her voice laced with deep professional satisfaction. I've been fielding calls from extremely angry vendor attorneys since 7 a.m. The venue management company has officially filed a notice of breach of contract against Beatrice and Donovan. The high-end catering company is preparing to file a civil lawsuit for $32,000 in unpaid services, plus damages. Because we set up the trust correctly, and because you were purely a third-party voluntary donor, your name is nowhere on the binding contracts. They cannot touch you. You are completely insulated from the financial blast radius. And the Yonkers property? I asked, cutting into my eggs. Oh, that's the best part, Clara chuckled. The notary folded like a cheap lawn chair the second I called him and threatened to report his license to the state board and the district attorney. He was terrified. He admitted Beatrice brought him a document with a forged signature. We have a signed, sworn affidavit from him stating he refused to process the quitclaim deed. Beatrice's little real estate scam is dead in the water. The apartment remains 100% yours, free and clear. Good. Have the locks changed today just in case they try to squat, I instructed. Already ordered, she replied. Julian, you really did it. You amputated the infected limb. It's going to bleed for a while, but you're going to survive. By noon, the social fallout began to mirror the financial collapse. The wedding had been heavily populated by Eleanor's wealthy country club friends, people who thrived on gossip, scandal, and the downfall of their peers. What happened in the reception tent the night before spread through their elite social circles like a wildfire fueled by gasoline. But it wasn't just rumors. Someone, I still don't know who, but I suspect it was one of the disgruntled catering staff or perhaps even my gossipy cousin Gareth, had recorded Beatrice's speech and my subsequent microphone drop on their smartphone. They didn't just keep it to themselves. They uploaded it to a local, highly active community Facebook group and forwarded it to half the guest list. The video was damning. It perfectly captured Beatrice's arrogant, cruel sneer as she called me a check, and it captured the sheer, satisfying terror on her face when I announced the money was gone and exposed her real estate fraud. Around 2 p.m., as I was packing my suitcase to leave the hotel, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line was simply, "I'm sorry." It was from Serafina. I opened it and read, "Julian, I am writing this from my mother's house. I didn't know the extent of what Beatrice was doing to you. I thought the money for the wedding was coming from Donovan's trust fund. He lied to me. He told me he owned that apartment in Yonkers. He told me he was a senior partner at your logistics firm. The vendors are demanding payment, and Donovan actually expects my parents to bail him out. My mother is absolutely refusing. I've left the hotel. I am meeting with a lawyer tomorrow to file for an annulment based on fraud. The marriage is over before we even filed the license. You were right to walk away. I'm sorry for my part in treating you poorly." I read the email twice. I didn't feel pity for her. Serafina wasn't an innocent victim. She was a willing, enthusiastic participant in the extravagance, as long as she thought the money was free and endless. But the fact that she was leaving Donovan, that the fake empire had crumbled into dust in less than 12 hours, was the ultimate validation. Donovan's entire identity, his entire worth to a woman like Serafina, was built entirely on my wallet. Without it, he was nothing but a broke, unemployed 28-year-old with a massive civil lawsuit hanging over his head. Later that afternoon, my D. Vivian, the family's resident spy and gossip monger, accidentally forwarded me an email chain that was circulating heavily among Beatrice's church group and country club friends. It included a secondary video, one I hadn't seen. It was a stealth recording taken earlier in the week during the rehearsal dinner at the country club. Beatrice was standing at the bar, talking to Eleanor. In the video, Beatrice laughed, waving her wine glass dismissively. "Oh, Julian is fine. He's just our walking wallet. He's as reliable as a direct deposit. He's too socially awkward and desperate for our approval to ever actually leave us, so we might as well use the resources to give Donovan what he deserves, right?" The email chain below the video link was absolutely brutal. Beatrice's friends were actively tearing her apart, calling her a monster, a gold digger exploiting her own son, and a fraud. Within 48 hours, Beatrice was quietly but firmly asked to resign from the leadership board of her charity organization. Her country club membership was placed under review. Her reputation, the pristine image she valued above all else, the thing she sold my soul to maintain, was completely, irreparably destroyed. The fake crown had been knocked off her head, and it shattered into a million pieces. 2 weeks passed. The dust from the wedding had finally settled into a hard, unforgiving concrete. I had permanently blocked every member of my immediate family on every platform. I ignored the emails they tried to send from new addresses. The silence in my life was profound. It was no longer the lonely, aching silence of being ignored. It was the incredibly peaceful silence of a fortress. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting at the kitchen island in my apartment, reviewing the final closing documents for a massive new commercial real estate deal my firm was managing. The doorbell rang. 3 sharp, desperate knocks. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. It was Donovan. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same faded college hoodie he had worn 3 days ago. His hair was unwashed, and he had dark, bruised circles under his eyes. I almost didn't answer. I had nothing left to say to him, but I knew he wouldn't leave. He would sit in the hallway all night. I wanted to put the final, definitive nail in the coffin. I walked to the door and opened it, but I left the heavy security chain attached. I looked at him through the narrow gap. "Julian, please," Donovan pleaded immediately, his voice cracking. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate and terrified. "Serafina actually filed the paperwork for the annulment. She won't talk to me. Mom is having a literal nervous breakdown and refuses to leave her bedroom. Dad had to cash out a massive chunk of his 401k retirement fund, taking the early withdrawal penalties, just to pay off the caterer so they wouldn't take us to court. And we still owe the venue 20 grand. We are drowning. Please, I know I messed up. I know Mom was awful to you, but you have to help us. We're family." I stared at him. I looked at the boy who had wrecked a Porsche and expected me to pay for it. The boy who had laughed out loud when his mother publicly humiliated me. The boy who felt entitled to the apartment I worked years to buy. "We share DNA, Donovan," I said, my voice steady, completely devoid of empathy or anger. "That does not make us family. Family protects each other. Family builds each other up. You and Beatrice preyed on me. You used my fundamental human desire for connection as a weapon to extract money to fund your vanity." "I was stupid," he cried, gripping the metal doorframe with white knuckles. "I'll pay you back. I swear to God. Just float us a loan to get the venue off our backs. They're going to put a lien on Mom and Dad's house. How are you going to pay me back?" I asked simply, logically. "You don't have a job. You have no assets. The Yonkers apartment you tried to steal from me is fully secured with a legal block. You have absolutely nothing to offer, Donovan. I am not angry anymore. I just don't care. I am permanently closing the bank." "You can't just abandon us," he yelled, tears welling in his eyes, his voice echoing in the hallway. "You're my brother." "I'm not abandoning you," I said softly, looking him dead in the eye. "I'm just returning the exact same energy you gave me for the last 10 years. You wanted to be the man of the house. Now you are. Good luck, Donovan." I shut the door gently, sliding the deadbolt into place with a loud, final click. I walked back to my living room. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. I felt like I had finally cut a massive, suffocating weight from my chest. I was free. The next morning, I went into my office early. The promotion I had earned a year ago was paying massive dividends, and my logistics firm was thriving under my leadership. I sat at my desk, drank my coffee, and opened LinkedIn. It was a platform usually reserved for corporate humblebragging and networking, but I needed to say something real. I needed to own my narrative before the whispers of my family's downfall distorted the truth. I didn't name my family. I didn't explicitly mention a wedding. I wrote a post about boundaries and the hidden cost of being the reliable one. For a decade, I was the dependable one. I wrote, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I was the fixer, the safety net, the walking wallet. I paid the bills no one wanted to talk about, covered the massive mistakes no one wanted to own, and swallowed my own voice so others could save face. I believed that financial generosity was the rent I had to pay to exist in my own family. But here is the dangerous truth. When you are the one who never needs anything, people start to believe you don't feel anything either. They mistake your silent sacrifice for endless, mindless compliance. They turn you into infrastructure. Last week, I stopped paying the rent. I set a firm boundary that cost me relationships, but saved my dignity and my future. Invisible labor and financial extraction in families is a crisis we don't talk about enough. Know your worth, and stop subsidizing people who view you as an appliance rather than a human being. I hit post. I expected a few likes from colleagues. By lunchtime, the post had exploded. It went incredibly viral within the finance, legal, and corporate networks. I had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments from executives, managers, and ordinary professionals sharing their own painful stories of family financial abuse, inheritance theft, and toxic dynamics. Mr. Harrison, my biggest client and a man who rarely showed emotion, walked past my glass office door, stopped, and gave me a silent, deeply respectful nod. My colleagues looked at me differently, not with pity, but with deep respect for my resilience. I had finally found my voice, and people were actually listening. A month later, I took a Friday off work. I drove 3 hours north, past the sprawling suburbs, past the city traffic, into the deep, quiet woods of upstate New York. I pulled my car onto a massive, 40-acre plot of land surrounded by ancient pine trees and a small, crystal-clear lake. I stepped out of the car, breathing in the sharp, clean air. Clara had finalized the real estate purchase that morning. I had taken the $96,000 from the dissolved wedding trust, added a significant portion of my own savings, and bought the land outright. I stood near the edge of the water, looking out at the expanse of green. The plan was already in motion. I was going to hire contractors to build a series of small, high-end cabins. It wasn't going to be a commercial resort. It was going to be a private retreat center, a place specifically designed for men and women who had spent their entire lives carrying the crushing weight of their families. A place for the fixers, the reliable ones, the walking wallets, to come and finally put down their burdens. A place where silence wasn't a punishment, but a gift of healing. I bent down, picking up a smooth stone from the edge of the lake. I threw it into the water, watching the ripples expand outward, disrupting the perfect reflection of the trees. They tried to erase my name from a piece of folded cardstock. They tried to make me invisible, so I bought a piece of the earth and put my name on the deed. I had lost my biological family, but I had finally found myself. And my life was just beginning. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever been treated like a walking wallet, or had to cut off the people who were supposed to love you the most? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.